Welcome to the Vitamin Professor podcast, brought to you by VRM Media, publisher of Vitamin Retailer and Nutrition Industry Executive magazines, in partnership with Nutraland USA. I'm your host, Gene Bruno, Professor Emeritus of Nutraceutical Science and Chief Scientific Officer of Nutraland USA. The purpose of this podcast is to help educate the dietary supplement industry about the science of nutraceuticals and other relevant topics. If you like what you hear and what you see, don't forget to like and subscribe. Let me tell you a little bit about our guest today. Dr. Yunpeng Ding is a senior researcher and currently serves as R&D director at Aker BioMarine. He supervises clinical research on the health benefits of omega-3 fatty acids for the company's human nutrition product, Superba krill oil. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about that one before. Now, before joining Aker BioMarine in 2021, Dr. Ding served as the chief biostatistician for a European CRO in pharmaceutical industry, where he was responsible for designing, analyzing, and reporting multiple phase 1 through 3 clinical trials. He obtained his medical degree from China in 2008, his Master of Science in Public Health in 2011, and his PhD in epidemiology and biostatistics from the University of Bergen, Norway, in 2016. Dr. Ding and I are going to discuss the effects of krill on lupus erythematosus today. Welcome, Yunpeng. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you for this very nice introduction, and thank you for having me here.
Oh, absolutely my pleasure. You know, I had a very good friend of mine. I'll still have the friend. I just haven't talked to her in a while. Used to work for me back years ago, and she educated me a little bit on lupus because she had lupus. And so I got to understand a little bit about what the challenges were and what she was dealing with on a regular basis. But for those of our listeners who don't know too much about lupus, could you kind of briefly describe what systemic lupus erythematosus is?
Yeah, sure, of course. Lupus is an autoimmune disease. So now globally, there might be, I think, around 5 million people suffering from lupus disease worldwide right now. So if you don't know what is autoimmune disease, that basically means, so in our human immune system, we usually have this defense mechanism against the infection, but sometimes when your body gets a bit confused, we could say, and then your body start to attack its own or our own tissue instead of bacteria or viruses, and then this could cause a lot of health issues, and that's what we see in lupus disease. Yeah. And in general, because it's autoimmune disease and attack all kinds of parts of our human body, it can have different symptoms. Sometimes, some people have skin issues, some people have joint issues, and, some more severe cases, people could have kidney issues or heart or even brain issues. So that's why it's called systemic, meaning, it can affect the whole body.
Yeah, my friend had both skin and joint issues, And so, yeah, for sure. It's a big problem for a lot of people. And what's interesting is, I spend a lot of time researching different types of diseases and the kinds of nutraceutical research studies that have been done. And I haven't found a tremendous amount of good quality studies on different nutraceuticals for lupus. So I was particularly interested to discover that you folks have done a study on it. And what I'd like you to do is let's start with having you describe the main objective of your study and what motivated you to investigate the effects of krill oil concentrate on patients with lupus.
Yeah. So lupus is a really complex disease. Like you said, your friend have probably like a skin, and some people have different issues, and it's really difficult to really, just capture the disease activity. We have done in our company, Aker BioMarine, we have done more than 50 clinical trials in different categories, just trying to explore the benefits of krill oil.
Yeah.
And so for this specific project with investigating lupus, so we collaborated with Lupus Research Alliance and also our CRO Ample Biosolutions, because they are specialized in precision medicine and also this autoimmune disease. So the primary objective of our study was to explore, whether supplementation with krill oil could correct a deficiency in omega-3s in those lupus population. Because epidemiological data has shown that people with lupus, they tend to have lower omega-3 index compared to general
That's
population.
interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's very interesting. So in a sense here, you're potentially correcting a deficiency and at the same time, perhaps yielding some beneficial results on the progress of the disease itself. That's fascinating. Yeah.
Because so the major cause of death for lupus patients, like the most significant risk for lupus patients of death for lupus patients is cardiovascular disease and heart disease. And
Yeah.
in general, so in the U.S. population, I think there are one paper published, or I think it's maybe in July this year. They investigated the omega-3 values among the world, and in the U.S., I think the omega-3 index was around maybe 5.1, 5.0. And at the same time, in those epidemiological studies, they have seen that, but for example, in our study, we have seen that lupus patients have the omega-3 index was around 4 to 4.5. So there is a small gap between lupus patients and general population. And if you know omega-3 index, you know that omega-3 index is actually a risk marker for cardiovascular disease. So when you have a lower omega-3 index, then there will be higher chance to get heart problem. So therefore, everything linked together. So those lupus patients, they are having higher or increased risk for heart disease. At the same time, they have lower omega-3 index. So that's why we think it's important to correct this omega-3 index deficiency in this population.
Now that makes total sense. So with regard to the omega-3 index, what is kind of the range? You mentioned that they're around 5. What is kind of the upper range, or what's a healthy range for the omega-3 index that people would strive for?
Yeah, so in a lot of studies, they have investigated like what's the optimal range, what's the suboptimal range, right? And I think most of the study, they figure out that if you have let's say, omega-3 index below 4%, that puts you into a really high risk of having cardiovascular disease.
Oh, okay.
And if you are in this intermediate range from say 4 to 8, you are in this, you have a lower risk compared to 4%, but you are still having a higher risk. Yeah, the optimal range is above 8%.
Okay, so yeah, they're pretty close at 5. They're pretty close to that really high risk range.
So lupus patients normally, their range is 4 to maybe 4.5, and the general population in the U.S. is already actually, to be honest, on the lower level globally.
That doesn't surprise me. I read, I want to say back in maybe 2012, somewhere in that range, I was doing some research just on omega-3s in general, and it was fascinating to see how if you look at the ratio between omega-3s and omega-6s, at one time it was somewhere like our ancestors had more of like a maybe a 15 or 16 to 1 ratio of omega-3 to omega-6s, and now in modern times it's flipped. We have a whole lot of omega-6s and not much in the way of omega-3s, at least not near enough. So to me, that's one of the people talk about vitamin D deficiency being prevalent, and it is, but I think that omega-3 deficiency really is pretty darn prevalent.
Yeah, exactly. I think because nowadays, a lot of people eat a lot of or too much processed food, and those processed food use a lot of oil that is very high in omega-6. That really just put us in the situation that we're overexposed to omega-6, at the same time, we don't really eat that much, sea fish like salmon.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
And
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 at the
that
same time, there are also other people, so there are many sources of omega-3 supplements. So one of the sources is the vegetable oil that is very high in alpha linoleic acid, which is also like at the beginning of omega-3. But then at the same time,
yeah.
you have delta-6, desaturase that would catalyze those pathways. But
But it's
somehow
still, it limits it to, I mean, it's the data that I've seen, tell me if this is what you've seen too, Yunpeng, is that the ALA doesn't convert as well to DHA and EPA. It has a limited ability to do so. So if your objective is to get the EPA and DHA omega-3 fatty acids, taking ALA is not necessarily going to be the path to achieve that, because it's not going to convert super well. You're better
yeah.
off using a direct source of those EPA, DHAs.
Exactly, because the enzyme that catalyze this pathway also catalyze the omega-6 pathway, and then when you're
Right.
overexposed to omega-6, then of course that pathway would be,
That makes
just
sense.
like the high-speed train, and your pathway to omega-3 and down to EPA and DHA are really limited. So that's
That's
why we need to. It's better to have a direct dietary supplement instead of just having a ALA.
That's right. And with all that omega, and a lot of people may not be aware, but well, certainly we know that omega-3 can be quite anti-inflammatory, which is nice. But a lot of people don't know that omega-6s, especially with an overabundance of it, can be pro-inflammatory. And so
Exactly.
you really need to establish a balance. And that's why something like krill oil or other sources of omega-3 is so important. Okay, well, I went off tangent there for a moment, but I thought that was really interesting, so I'm glad we did. So you gave a little bit about the objective of the study. Now, the next question has to do with what was the dose of the krill oil concentrate that you administered to your participants, and what were the primary and secondary endpoints of the study?
Yeah, sure. So the primary goal was to correct the deficiency of omega-3 index.
Got it.
Then it comes to the primary endpoint, which is the omega-3 index.
Sure.
So we measured the omega-3 index at baseline, and then at our primary duration is 24 weeks and 48 weeks. But we actually measured omega-3 index every 4 weeks along the whole way, because we want to see if this correction is consistent or not. So that's our primary endpoint, omega-3 index. And we also have several secondary endpoints. So of course, our hypothesis is we want to see if by adding omega-3, by giving those omega-3 krill oil supplement to the lupus patients, would that also alleviate their symptoms?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
That's
also
great.
one
That's a
of the
great
concern.
secondary endpoint. Yeah. And what kind of dosage were you using in the study?
So it's 4 grams krill oil every day. So which
Yeah.
means that, because in our clinical trials we have this 1 gram capsule. So
4 capsules a day. Okay.
yeah, so the participants were advised to take 2 capsules in the morning and 2 capsules in the evening. So 4 grams a day. That would give, because I think in that trial we used the krill oil that is about 30%, that has about 30% EPA and DHA.
Yeah.
So 4 grams of krill oil would give you 1.2, a little bit less than 1.2 gram EPA plus DHA.
Right. Now, is that dosage a common dosage recommended or for most people, or strictly focused on the lupus patients?
It's like this. So because every trial is a little bit different, and then every population is a little bit different.
Sure.
So normally, for example, in lupus population, we include patients that are having 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 flares, or having some kind of higher disease activity at baseline. Then we want to give them a higher dose, and also thinking that their baseline level was really low. So we
Sure.
want to correct the deficiency as fast as possible, because every clinical trial we can only observe them for a very short period of time. So we want to correct them as fast as possible. Then making sure that the whole effect is enduring along the whole way. So that's why we gave them 4 grams krill oil.
Oh, that makes
Um,
sense.
yeah, but I mean,
If
we have trials. For example, if you just if you're a completely healthy population and we just
yeah,
want to see some changes, for example, for your skin condition or for other things, then they might have a lower dose.
okay, that makes
Mm.
sense. All right, very good. Okay, let's see. Now that we know a little bit about the background of the study, what were the key findings regarding the omega-3 index in participants, and in comparison to the placebo group?
Yeah. So we actually, so as I said earlier, so we measured the omega-3 index of those patients at baseline, and then we followed them up, and then we asked them to measure the omega-3 index every 4 weeks. We already see very significant increase of omega-3 index after, just 4 weeks of supplementation. So the data has shown that from in a krill oil group, the data show that from baseline to 4 weeks supplementation, their omega-3 index increased 60%. So the increase was from
Wow.
4.5 all the way jumped to 7.2 in
I'm
just four
sure I'm
weeks.
sure that was statistically significant.
Yeah, it's very significant. But
Yeah.
at the same time, placebo group, there's no increase at all. So it's like from
Well, that makes sense.
4.3 to 4.1. So it really
Yeah.
shows a huge difference on this increase of omega-3 index. And another thing that we noticed along the way was, we check them every 4 weeks. This increase is very consistent. So, and also slowly increasing over the supplementation duration. So our major outcome was at 24 weeks. So actually the increase was from baseline 4.5 to 8.1 at week
Wow.
24. So it's like it really doubled, almost doubled, right?
Right.
So like
So
more than 80%.
consistent use kept getting it higher until you reach that 8.1. That's amazing. I mean,
Yeah,
you not only like corrected the deficiency, you put them in a healthy range.
exactly. So
Optimal,
more than
yeah.
50% of the population were actually over 80%, and they are in this optimal omega-3 index range, would give them really good protection against the cardiovascular disease.
Wow. That is pretty pretty
Yeah,
powerful findings.
yeah. And
Now,
in our study design, so we measured that part, and but also we have a second part of the study. So after week 24, we actually asked the placebo group to see if they want to switch,
that's right.
because
Yeah.
then we open the label, right? So we want them to switch, asking them if they want to switch from placebo to a krill oil treatment. A lot of them did the switch, and then we see that after so from week 24, then the placebo group was having like the omega-3 index around 4.6. So it's still, in this very low omega-3 index group. And then after giving them the krill oil, so also in 4 weeks, they increased about 50% on omega-3 index from 4.6 to
Wow.
6.6.
Still a much better range.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, and also that increase also just was very consistent along the way until the very end of the study at week 24. So in the end, the placebo group after those treatment, krill oil treatment, their omega-3 index also increased until to 7.5.
That's phenomenal. You must have been so pleased with the results of the study. I mean, this is like kind of an ideal situation because you do a study, you don't always know how the results are going to turn out, and to be able to find such tremendous results had to have been exciting. Well, okay, so the increase in the omega-3 index is phenomenal. I mean, that is
Mm.
the main endpoint. Did you see any kind of impact on just on the disease activity or symptoms or anything?
Yeah, so it's like this. So for the lupus disease activity, we used a SLIDI score to measure that, to measure the disease activity. So the SLIDI is just the SLE disease activity index,
Okay,
SLIDI.
sure,
Yeah,
sure.
so we use this score to measure the disease activity. We see that so in krill oil group, basically if we include all the patients, it's sort of going down. The how to say, the whole trend is going, like disease activity is going
It's going
down
down.
all the way.
Nice.
But there are some up and downs
There's
because
always
the
individual
nature of
variations.
lupus is just a flare remission, flare
Right.
remission.
And there's and disease activity isn't just a function of isn't just a function of omega-3 index. There's other
And to
factors
measure
involved.
the yeah,
So yeah.
to measure like the lupus like the up and downs, it's just the disease course is like that. But we didn't really see anything significant comparing to placebo group. But one thing worth noting is in those we have a subpopulation that has high disease activity at baseline, meaning comparing to other subjects. So this small population, they were having quite high disease activity in different organs or different areas. So there were 9 people in this small population, and among them, we could see that the krill oil worked really, really well. So because we also measured disease activity every 4 weeks from day 1 to week 4, week 8, week 16, and then we saw a significant difference until week 16, but so the disease activity really decreased, but this significance somehow, unfortunately disappeared at week 24.
Yeah, that's not unusual that happens. And it's also not unusual that people who have a more severe disease activity tend to be higher responders. You certainly see that.
But in this population, it was quite fun because if you use this SLIDE score to measure the disease activity at baseline, so in Krill group, their disease activity score was about 10.7, which is the average score, and then at week 16, the average was 4.2. So it decreased really a lot. So you have very much lower disease activity.
More than half.
16, yeah, more than half after 16 weeks treatment. The one reason why the significance disappeared was because at week 24, so disease activity in krill group bounced back a little bit, and then at the same time placebo group decreased a little bit, and then
sure. So it doesn't mean the way I like to explain it to people who don't necessarily understand the difference is that statistical significance and clinical significance aren't always the same thing. And so you might have some clinical significance to something, but it may not reach a statistical significance. That doesn't mean there isn't some great value yet.
Exactly.
Now, so I'm curious, because you had such, interesting positive results in disease activity with the patients who had that high baseline disease activity, what would you say were the potential mechanisms that could sort of explain those improvements in that particular group?
I think it's mostly because of the anti-inflammatory effect that the EP and DHA has.
Yeah.
And that's also one of the reasons why we wanted to do this study in the very beginning, because EP and DHA are well known for having for having this anti-inflammatory effect.
For sure, and that makes a great deal of sense. I mean, there's so much research on omega-3s from different sources being effective for inflammation, and a lot of studies on different kinds of inflammatory disorders in which omega-3s have performed extremely well, and including research done on krill oil. Okay, so why? So I think you've kind of addressed this already, but I'd like you to just expand on it. Why are patients with lupus at a higher risk of developing cardiovascular disease? Is it because of the much lower omega-3 index, would you say, or is there other reasons?
Yeah, so omega-3 index is more well, it's a risk marker for cardiovascular disease, but it's not like they have omega-3 index lower, then they have they got a higher risk of cardiovascular disease. I think the whole thing is still about atherosclerosis and then dyslipidemia and those things, because people with autoimmune disease like lupus, they are in a situation where they have chronic inflammation in their body, and this chronic inflammation could really be an accelerator for causing atherosclerosis. So that's one thing. And the second thing is also, people with lupus, I don't think it's every one of them, but a lot of them having metabolic syndrome and dyslipidemia.
Okay.
So they are having lower HDL, higher LDL cholesterol, and also they have seen to have higher triglycerides as well. And those dyslipidemia parameters would also cause you to be in this higher risk of having atherosclerosis.
Well, sure. I didn't realize that there was a higher degree of metabolic syndrome in lupus patients. So,
Yeah, so lupus is a genetic environment, stress. It's a lot of hormonal. It's a lot of different things, but a lot of them are having a metabolic syndrome as well.
okay, very good.
Yeah.
So, along the same lines, again, you've kind of addressed some of this, but so why do you think that omega-3 index is considered a significant predictor of cardiovascular health? And why is maintaining it at that, say, 8 to 11% level recommended to help, mitigate cardiovascular disease?
Yeah. So as I just said before, so lupus patients have this chronic inflammation status, so they are having higher risk of getting cardiovascular disease. So omega-3s are well known for their anti-inflammatory effect. So that's why having a higher omega-3 index means you are protected. You are protected in a way that your body is going to balance pro-inflammatory and anti-inflammatory status. This balance would not drag you down, but would decrease the risk of having you in this pro-inflammatory status, and then lower the risk of heart disease. So maintaining this 8 to 11% of omega-3 index is really crucial, and this number, it's not like so someone just come out this number from nowhere. It's like coming from I think it's more than 100,000 people, the database,
Wow.
all those published articles, and this data establish this threshold, telling you that, okay, people from the historical data, people above 8% are naturally having not naturally, but are having lower risk of getting a heart disease. And then if you're not in this range, if you're in a lower range, then those people are having much, much higher risk of getting cardiovascular disease. That's why we think 8 is good. So go above 8.
So excellent. So what would you say are the implications of your study's findings for cardiovascular disease prevention in lupus patients through omega-3 supplementation?
Yeah, I think one very important thing is, in lupus patient management, maybe we should think to add omega-3 supplement as an add-on treatment or supplementation in addition to other standard treatment in this population group.
Yes.
So for one thing, yeah. So most of the treatment right now for lupus patients are just the drugs that could alleviate the symptom, but they are not really, treating what could happen in 10 years, right? So having omega-3 in there as an add-on supplementation for them is actually, putting them in this lower risk of having cardiovascular disease. And also, so in our study, we also have shown that because in every clinical trial, you do measure adverse events as well. So comparing to placebo, the very interesting in this article is comparing to placebo. So krill oil group actually had almost 50% less adverse events comparing to placebo.
Wow.
Yeah, so this is very interesting, and meaning like a krill oil is really, really safe. It's extremely safe in this population. So that's why I think it's very meaningful to have krill oil as an alternative add-on for this patient's management, disease management program.
It seems to me like, wouldn't it make sense if physicians that are dealing with lupus patients, if one of the standard tests that they administered was an omega-3 index test? I've got a lupus patient. They're likely to be low in omega-3s. Let me do an omega-3 index test. Let me see where they're at and try to correct that deficiency. It's just a standard operating procedure for lupus patients. It seems like it should be a normal thing that they should do all the time. I wonder how far away we are from getting to that point where the doctors start doing that.
Yeah, and also you can think, for example, you get a blood test, and then you are probably in this population. You're in this population, and then you can see, okay, my triglycerides are in a higher level. Then why not taking krill oil? Because krill oil is also well known for decreasing triglycerides in your blood, which also help you to protect your heart.
Absolutely. So I have another question for you that I just kind of thought about, and
Mm.
it's kind of more general with regard to krill. I remember when krill first came onto the market. I've been in this industry 45 years, so I have a lot of memory of things coming out into the market. And it was kind of like, wow, there's a new source of omega-3. It was just fish oil before. And now you have fish oil-based omega-3s, you got algae omega, you got krill, you have some different sources. And I was just wondering about your thoughts on krill oil uh, as a source of omega in a sort of comparison to some of the other sources, especially just your standard fish oil. Do you think they're about the same? Do you think there are advantages to one over the other? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think so. For those people, who don't know what krill oil is, krill oil comes from krill, and
Right.
there are many types. There are like more than 80. I think there are more than 80 different types of krill in the world. But krill oil only comes from Antarctic Sea, only in that area. So krill oil is comparing to other omega-3 supplements like fish oil or algae oil. Krill oil not only have EPA and DHA. It's also you also have to see how those EPA and DHA are bounded. Like what's the molecular structure of those EPA and DHA.
That's
So in
right.
krill oil, krill oil is so unique compared to all the other omega-3 supplements is that krill oil has EPA and DHA bound to phospholipids. Phospholipids has a unique feature that phospholipid is both water soluble and fat soluble,
That's right.
meaning we have done experiments.
Hydrophilic, hydrophobic.
Exactly.
I tell people that's like our cellular membrane that it's around all of our cells. It's a phospholipid bilayer, and it allows the passage of nutrients into there. And there are products out there that makes an impact on their bioavailability. So I think, if I remember correctly, one of krill's big claim to fame is it has very good bioavailability because of the phospholipid binding to the omegas. Is that correct?
Yeah. So when you let's say you have two capsules of either fish oil or krill oil, and then you swallow them, and then your body absorbs them, it goes into your blood. But the thing is, not necessarily everything that you swallow would get into your blood. So
Right.
there are some wastes, or like they go to some other places that would never reach your body. So a benefit of krill oil is it basically the absorption is really, really good. It's more than 98%. And there are studies that have shown that the krill oil that you take, the EPA and DHA bounded on phospholipids in krill oil, they are more how to say they are more readily absorbed and then attached to the cell membrane compared to fish oil. So we have studies showing that, meaning the same, even though you think that you take the same amount of capsules, but how much EP and DHA are eventually
Right.
embedded onto the membrane, that level is different.
That makes sense. Because we know in this business, it's not just what you take, it's what you absorb and what's ultimately bioavailable.
Yeah.
And so that was one of the biggest. I remember some of the early campaigns, advertising campaigns, where they would show you like, how much you're getting absorbed in one form versus another. I've always felt that the research on krill has been very good, and you keep having more and more studies just validating it. So so I would say that one, krill oil is an excellent source of omega-3s for just the general population, and also vitally important for people with lupus. But you got a lot of other areas of research too, right? I
Yeah.
mean, if you were just
Yeah.
to, without going into any detail, just list some of the areas of the kinds of people that have benefited from omega-3s. What kind of disease states other than lupus have people had benefits from krill oil and omega-3s?
Yeah, so I think the first important thing, or like the first thing people think, oh, omega-3s are normally, just like heart disease. So as I said earlier, so krill oil
Sure.
has been proved to go like to lower the triglycerides in the blood
Right.
for more than like 20% in the population where they have very high triglycerides in the blood.
Yeah.
So that's one thing for heart. And also we have several studies showing that the krill oil is really good for muscle synthesis and then to improve your muscle strength, especially in older population.
Which is awesome
So
because you just don't think of krill oil for that purpose. And yet you have the
yeah,
research to
because the
show
krill
that.
oil, as I said, it's the EPA and DHA bound to phospholipids, and most of those phospholipids are phosphatidylcholine. So, and phosphatidylcholine or choline is really important for muscle function.
Right, right.
Yeah, so
So
we
you
have
said
this.
that was particularly beneficial in older folks. You mean like people with sarcopenia, that sort of thing?
Um, in the study that we did, the population was not sarcopenia, but it's
Okay,
more like a healthy population,
okay,
elderly population, but they didn't do any. They didn't have how to say structured training program in their daily life.
got it.
Yeah. So in those population, we gave them also 4 gram krill oil, and we followed them up for 3 months, and then we measured their muscle strength um, on their leg before and after those 3 months, and then we see that I think the muscle strength increased by 10%, and then
That's
the muscle thickness
really
also
interesting.
increased 3.5
Really?
percent. Yeah. So if you
That's
imagine,
interesting.
I mean, just if you go to the gym and ask someone, okay, so how much muscle gain you could have after 3 months training, and then how much protein you have to take, they're going to give you a huge number. So it's very impressive to see just 4 grams krill oil every day, can really deliver
Has
10% muscle strength.
yeah.
Yeah.
I know that krill oil has also had some research on it for arthritis too.
Exactly. So especially in osteoarthritis. So we have one
Yeah.
study published, was conducted in Australia that used 4 grams of krill oil. So in that study, we recruited people with moderate knee pain because of osteoarthritis. So in this population, you need to give them a really high, not really high, but you need to give enough dose for treating this problem. So we
Right.
give them 4 grams krill oil. And then after 6 months, we could see that the WOMAC score is a score that
Right.
is a measurement to see how much knee pain or like physical uh, condition, physical
Right.
performance. If you can bend your knee, those things, it's a score to measure that. So we saw that after 6 month treatment, their WOMAC score also improved significantly. So their knee pain was also decreased a lot.
That's that's really significant. I know so many people with osteoarthritis, and you always find new herbs or new things that are coming out that there's some research on, but people shouldn't forget, even though you get sexy new nutraceuticals that are talking about their application for um, something like osteoarthritis, don't forget that something as fundamental as omega-3s, particularly in the form of krill, has
Yeah.
some really, really good research to support its ongoing use. And then you also get all the other benefits that krill has to offer at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, eventually, osteoarthritis, everyone gonna get osteoarthritis as long as you
Everybody, if you get old enough, you're going to get it, right?
yeah. And then it's a hyper-inflammatory disease, and then most of the pain are caused by inflammation. And
Mhm.
EPA and DHA are really good at having this anti-inflammatory effect. So why not try omega-3s and especially krill oil?
Very good. Well, so let me ask you, I think we're near wrapping up here, but I'd like to ask if there's any parting thoughts that you'd like to share with our listeners about krill oil, whether it's for lupus or for any other purpose.
No, I think omega-3s, especially krill oil, is really important in our daily life. A lot of people, especially if you don't have access to seafood, especially like deep sea fish like a salmon or fatty fish,
Right.
I think it's quite important to take supplements, omega-3 supplements. And krill oil has this, as I said, has this unique feature compared to fish oil, and then it doesn't really give too much burden to your stomach. And also we have our company, we have done more than 50 clinical trials demonstrating the beneficial effects of krill oil on both heart, joint, muscle. We also have a lot of other studies on cognition, skin, sports recovery, but we don't really have time to cover everything today. So I really encourage people just to, have a look at krill oil and know more of krill oil, and maybe try krill oil one day, and you will be amazed by the effect of this small red pill.
Yeah, I would add to that personally, when people ask me, what supplements should I take? And if I don't know anything about them, I've just met them, there's three things I tell everybody to take. I said, take a multivitamin, take some vitamin D because you're probably not getting enough, and take an omega-3 because you're probably not getting enough. Because those are things that people simply are not getting sufficient amounts of. And people are pretty good on the vitamin D now. They're using vitamin D, but not near enough people, I think, are using omega-3. So I want to thank Dr. Yunpeng Ding. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing the research. I've learned some new things today. That's exciting. And I also want to say to our audience, if you like what you heard, please like and subscribe. And we'll see you next time on The Vitamin Professor.